It may not be the season that we wanted, but it's the season that we've got. And coming away from the most entertaining Bears-Packers game that I know I've watched in about 4 years, the Bears now face the Minnesota Vikings in a game that, Nick, I don't know about you, but I feel like this one is sort of the gateway to the rest of the season. The Packers game brings us back in. This game shows us, was the Packers game a flash in the pan, or was the Packers game a sign of the Thomas Brown era? How well did Thomas Brown do? What should you be watching for in this Vikings game? We'll talk about all that and more on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Us, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, editor-in-chief of the Bears blog, right here alongside my co-host Nick Whalen of Football Guys, as we try to bring you the best Bears podcast we possibly can. And Nick, you're in Wisconsin. You live in Madison, Wisconsin. So let me ask you, does the kick make all the difference? Or honestly, did it feel pretty good that you saw your quarterback get the team in place to do it days after the fact?
Um, the thing that bothers me, and one is I'm a true Bears fan, y'all. Like, I just loathe Green Bay, like everything about it. So what bothers me the most is, when you walk to the gym, the grocery store, everywhere, and they got their stuff on and they're like strutting with pride. Uh, a lot of like real fans that talk to me are like, "Oh, Caleb looks good. We got away with one." Like that's the part that gives me some, because that's how it felt. It felt like, because this season, y'all, I know we're very hung up on they've lost 4 games in a row and Waldron and this and that. It's really been about Caleb's development. And so, like, even if we made the playoffs and lost in the wild card round or won one game, like, we would feel great about that. I get it. But like, if it was like Swift and Roshan, and if Herbert stayed and it was not Caleb learning a lot, like, it would be a lost season. So when you can see it in crunch time, and I put this tweet out, I don't know if you saw this one, Robert, where how big would the national narrative be different if the Hail Mary didn't happen and they made the field goal, him coming back against Washington and Green Bay, his first game against Green Bay, and they're both wins.
Let's
Like, the perception's different, you
Nick,
know?
let's eliminate all three. Let's eliminate all three weird games this season, okay? So
Mhm.
let's say that Caleb was just awful in week one with no real redeeming quality, and the defense didn't create 2 takeaways and basically finish the game for the team. That's a game you can easily move past from a media perspective because it's his first one. It's
Yeah.
the first one in September. And then you'd look at the Washington game and this one, this Packers game, and you'd say, okay, I think we got a dude here. And instead, like you're talking about, 2 plays on the defense and the special teams unit that have nothing to do with Caleb Williams end up kind of redefining the season, which, from a narrative perspective, can I just say this, Nick? What's new? Right? People
Yep.
tend to be a year late on the Bears one way or another, and they default to negative because this is a joke I make about the Chicago Tribune all the time. You will sound like a very smart person if you bet against the Bears and say negative things about the Bears most of the time, because it's just the way things have tended to go for the team for 30
Mhm.
years. But like you're talking about, I mean, at least for me, because I don't really have to wear it. I'm in Dallas. People didn't talk to me about it, which frankly was great. Like, what a
I got a
joy.
lot of talk. I got a lot of talk, a lot of text, a lot of in person. The Bears suck. All that stuff.
That sounds awful. And I
and, and then what I say, I'm like, yep.
can I say something funny, Nick? So I've seen on Twitter today, right? And this is the part of the show where you and I sort of recap what are our cold takes, what did we see when we watched the tape, et
Sure.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? First of all, I want to talk a little bit about Thomas Brown, if you don't mind. And then I know you've got something that we want to dig into. But so I've seen a lot of people already running away with, hey, what if the Bears hire this coordinator and keep Thomas Brown? The hot name I hear right now is Mike Vrabel, right? Uh, hey, Thomas Brown, are the Bears gonna be able to keep him? Do they need to make him the head coach? And look, Nick, I don't want to be the bubble burster, but Bears fan, I'd rather you hear it from me. Thomas Brown put out a very vanilla game plan that was functional. And the difference between utterly unviable and functional is stark. So when you watch that game and you went, this is way better, your eyes aren't lying to you. That was way better. But Nick, we still have linemen leaving middle linebackers unblocked on every third rushing play. We still have guys that seem lost when it comes to, especially Rome. Rome is awesome. He's my favorite receiver on the team, and he's still running through zone coverage and finding ways. DJ Moore found creative ways to cover himself in terms of the route running. Like, the
Mhm.
details are not all the way there. They just called the game that, if you don't mind me saying it again, we said this on the post game. This is a game plan we thought we were getting week one. It's a
Yep.
shame it took 10 weeks to get a starter kit game plan for how to win with Caleb Williams, but we did, and it looked good. But in my opinion, Nick, it's these next few weeks as Thomas Brown iterates that we're going to really see whether he's got something in the tank or not, because this is the base plate and it's a solid base plate. But if it never evolves from here, it's another NFL requisite offensive coordinator, just not an awful one. Did you see the same thing?
100%. Because people are like ready to start building the Thomas Brown statue, it feels like. And I'm like, I mean, there were still plays called where I'm like, we're kind of outnumbered that way, or like designs, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about it. And basic stuff, it was executed better. I felt like they played faster, but like even the touchdown run for Roshan, where everyone's like, "Oh, Doug Kramer doesn't touch anybody." Gerald Everett misses his guy
Everybody
too.
misses.
It
It's
was
kind of a comedy play.
well, I'm so shocked he scored. It was like 2 guys blocked, missed everybody, and 3
Both
guys are on Roshan, he
Both
scores.
of those downs, like the Roshan 3-yard run, nobody gets a piece of anybody. And then the
No.
Roshan scoring run, nobody gets a piece of anybody. I do think that there are some running to the edges where I want to just, okay, if I want
Well,
to, I
I
just brought
loved
up,
it
yeah.
because it worked early in the game and they came back to it. Like that was the
Mhm.
only thing I would like about Thomas Brown is he saw something and he's like, "Hey, it worked. We'll flip it or we'll redesign it and use it again." Just like so you're going to talk about outside run. It also worked on zone read. Where
Yes.
zone read, one of them Caleb should have kept and he's like, should have kept that one. And then they flipped it like 2 plays later and he had like a 16-yard run.
Right. I think another thing. So Caleb talked in his presser about how, no, Thomas didn't really tell me anything. Like, I'm the one who thought, well, I have legs too. I should use them. And Caleb Williams, I don't believe you, because it felt to me, Nick, like Thomas Brown. I just spent a hot minute tearing him down. Let me build the guy back up. I thought Thomas Brown placed the right points of emphasis across the roster. Point of emphasis, let's get DJ Moore yak opportunities. Point of emphasis, Caleb, you don't read five guys. You aren't there. You aren't that guy yet. You're not Matt Stafford. It's great that you want to be Matt Stafford, but right now you're Caleb Williams. So if you take a look at your first two reads and you don't like them, get out of the pocket.
Mhm.
Make this defense respect you. And shocker, Nick, in the second half, Caleb didn't get pressured almost at all. Because I don't know if you remember it, on the fourth down, Quay Walker runs up like he's got a free run at Caleb, and he freezes
It's
because Caleb,
bizarre, isn't it?
everybody's playing contain. Caleb Williams had run for 70 yards in the first half, and this defense was frozen, and they were willing to
Mhm.
give Caleb a pocket. Unsurprisingly, he took advantage for one of his best passing halves of the last couple weeks, because that's really what I thought Thomas did. Is you flash a little zone read to get the inside zone open. You flash a little toss sweep to get the play action open. You flash a deep throw to Cole Kmet so that you can come back to the Keenan Allen underneath route later. Like, he just got, I think this is pretty NFL standard. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not even trying to glow about it too much, Nick, but we got the run married up with the pass look. We got the outside run look married up with the inside run look. We got the blocking footwork mostly right. Like,
You
again,
you know what it
basic
reminds me
things.
of? You know what it reminds me of, Robert? It reminds me of a guy that had about 3 days to put a game plan together. Because we didn't find out
Mhm.
about this until, what, Tuesday? And they even said he was behind. It really felt like and this isn't against Thomas Brown,
No.
but it wasn't like he's a guru. or anything at
It's
this
more
point.
us saying like, let's slow down on building the statue.
Yeah.
We got through syllabus day, to put it into teacher
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah, that's
Like
fair.
we can't do the end of year review for this teacher yet because we haven't seen anything. He
Mm.
seems
And
like his syllabus is solid, but we haven't seen anything yet.
yeah, and there was plays in there, y'all, where Caleb could have had more, and there was a couple of pre-snap penalties, right? But there was a 15-yard out completed to Keenan that wasn't added in there. There was, I don't know if it was an RPO or not, Robert, but there was the bubble screen to Keenan where Keyshawn Nixon came inside and DJ blocked him, but it was too low off the turf. I mean, there was nobody within 10 yards of
Nope.
Keenan. He would have had I don't know. I think it was actually 15 yards of safety was he would have had, I would say 8 to 12 yards on that play. So there were still more good plays designed in there. And we're not talking negatively. This is definitely everybody a step in the positive direction.
Massive
We
step.
w- we want to see the chess match because that's what football is. Football is a game about players, matchups, space, and timing. That's all it is.
I also think there's something to be said for rhythm because in the third or fourth quarter, I think it was, of New England, Caleb had some nigh unexplainably bad misses. Like it was that one, right? Where Caleb rolled to his right and just sky mails a ball to Cole Kmet on a flat
Yeah.
route where Kmet's wide open. You don't got to wear it. He's a rookie quarterback, whatever,
Well,
right? This
it's
stuff
like
happens.
the curl to Rome this past week.
Yes, but on that one, at least on that one, I don't know if you noticed, Rome attacks up the seam on the right side of the 20 and then finishes his route on the left side of the 20, and the ball is high right over the 20. And so maybe Rome drifted out of position. The problem is, Nick, I would love to hang that on Caleb. That small segue here. I would love to hang that on Caleb, okay? I would love to say Caleb's been inaccurate all year. This is what it is, right?
Mhm.
But Nick, we had not one, not two, almost five different moments where I'm sitting here looking at Caleb and his receiver, and I'm saying, we are not on the same page. That can't happen. That's 15% of your dropbacks where Caleb throws a corner and Kmet runs flat, right?
Yep. Yep.
Where
Yep.
Rome doesn't sit down and Caleb expects him to, where
Mhm.
maybe Rome curls in too far, or maybe Caleb spooked by the linebacker that fainted out and then faded back up the line. That was actually beautiful linebacker play. Like, there's just too many of these moments, if you ask me,
Yeah.
where the quarterback expects a receiver to be in a specific, particular spot, and the receiver isn't there for whatever reason. And it drives me wild because the I've been begging for Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields to play with anticipation for as long as I've covered the Bears seriously. Caleb is playing with anticipation. The problem with anticipation is that if your skill guys aren't where they're supposed to be, your
Right.
quarterback didn't wait to make sure you ran the route right.
Well,
He threw it to a spot.
yeah. Well, I have more to this, and this is actually a gripe that I have. I had a talk with a friend actually who is trying to get a high school head coaching job, and we were talking about the passing game, and I said honestly, the passing game is so much more complex than people want to talk about. So like you're talking about that curl to Rome, right? Rome has to be in a certain uh location, but also depth and the time. And then when he looks for the ball is when Caleb has to be done with his drop and ready to throw position. Those things have to link up. Now, again, he can anticipate and throw it a little bit early, but the timing of his drop with it, it's a rhythm, right? It all goes
It's
together.
supposed to time
And
up.
when people now again, it's very easy to bash Shane Waldron right now. Okay. And I hear stuff like he didn't tell guys how Caleb, how many steps on the drop? He didn't tell this guy certain depth on whatever. If we're being honest, every quarterback's drops are different. They're different depths, they're different quicknesses. I mean, Robert, you did a whole breakdown on Justin Fields on how long it takes him, right?
Oh yeah.
So if it takes him longer, you'd want him to take a shallower drop to have the timing link up with the receivers. You know what I mean? So like
Oh,
to me, I think that people, it's not a this isn't a black and white thing. It's a very gray thing. It's an art form. The passing game is,
let me
and you have to get to know your receivers and how they're going to run routes and timing. And it wasn't linked enough at this point in the season with Waldron. So I get that part of it, but there still is an art form to it.
Nick, I've got a perfect way of phrasing this because here's one other thing, okay? Bears fans, I think that Shane Waldron did a pretty poor job And I think that's clear, right?
Yeah.
You don't need me to say otherwise. I also think, by the way, Nick, not to create some kind of segue here, Shane Waldron is a great example of a lesson that if you're listening to this, I want you to learn it because I learned it too. I did not realize how important the head coach's detail orientation or the demeanor at practice is on the offensive side of the ball, even if that coach is defensive. And I say that, Nick, because the difference between Shane Waldron's Bears offense and Shane Waldron's Seattle offense across two different quarterbacks is pretty stark. And so kudos to you, Pete Carroll. Things keep working. Like the let Russ cook movement was sort of a failure and made it like, oh, I think Pete knows what he's doing. And
Right.
then this with Shane Waldron makes you go, oh, I think Pete knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Anyways, one other thing, Nick, that I think it gets really twisted up right around here, because we're hearing this with Shane Waldron, right? I know you're talking about Matt Waldman says, it's clear Caleb didn't get any instruction on his drops. Y'all, if Caleb was playing well and we found out Shane had said, man, do what feels comfortable to you, people would have loved that. I mean, lest we forget, Luke Getzey prescribed drops and footwork for Justin Fields, and we didn't like that at the time
Yeah.
because Justin didn't like it and wasn't playing well with it. So when it doesn't work, you get mad. And
Right.
somebody frames that coaching decision in the worst way possible, right? Like you're talking about, Nick, it is very easy right now
Right.
to be Shane Waldron is the devil. And it's
Right.
it's
Like
just
he's
not
like
that
the I
serious.
mean, it didn't work, y'all. Like, I'm not trying to like say that one, but also like as a coach, my philosophical thing of like receivers running routes, I'm not a person that says, "Hey, this foot has to go here, this has to go here, this has to go here." There's no deviation from that. When in reality, it's like, well, if you had inside leverage on this, I want you to take an extra step to get more range.
Mhm.
Like that's part of the game too. So like, there's really no, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. There's a lot of area in between. But overall, it felt like a more confident Bears offense, no matter
Yes.
what was said, was on the field on Sunday, which is all we wanted to. Playing fast, maybe thinking less, whatever it would be.
Absolutely. And the Bears got special plays from Roshan up the middle, from Swift on the edges, from Rome down the sidelines, from DJ in yak spots, from Cole Kmet now and again. Like, say what you will about Thomas Brown's usage, because I don't know if he can use Swift as the exclusive edge back and Roshan getting heavy duty load up the middle. I don't know if that can work forever because it becomes a little bit of a tell down the stretch. But hey, you got to present one look. You basically have to create a tell so that you can betray that tendency. There's just one thing, Nick, that I would like to see change. Do you want to guess what it is, or do you just want me to tell you?
Ooh, I'm curious.
This is in the hard conversation category.
Um, Less Keenan Allen?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly it. Where I am not a Keenan Allen hater. The guy is a very, very good football player, but on probably 40 to 45% of passing downs. That's going to sound like a big fraction. It is. Keenan Allen is the number one read. And in my opinion, Nick, he's not consistent enough at separating, at
Yeah.
winning. To get that kind of target share to me, you need to be dominating. And for whatever reason, maybe it's that in Los Angeles, Justin Herbert is just a drastically better player than Caleb Williams. Could be. Maybe Keenan Allen's lost his step. I think it's hard to tell with the way he plays because he played pretty slowly in Los Angeles too last
Yeah.
year. Um, but regardless of what's happening, in my opinion, Nick, there are way too many of these routes where even if Keenan did separate, what did we do this for? A 5 yard out? Like we have to throw out to the edge of the we have to throw to the sidelines just so that we can pick up 4 yards and have our receiver take a hit. There's a point to me where I think you say, okay, we're planning for the future. The future is Rome, DJ, Cole Kmet and Keenan, we're going to get you plenty of targets, just like we have. Just not, I think the one that sticks out to me the most, Nick, the most obvious one. I want Caleb to throw that ball when he sees that his receiver is stemming up the field and about to break across the field, and the only person in the area code is linebacker Quay Walker. You better be throwing that ball. I
Mhm.
completely disagree with Tom Brady. We've got my best receiver up
Yep.
against a linebacker. I love this matchup. And it takes Keenan so long to get to where Caleb threw it that Quay gets back into play. And I have a hard time believing that if Rome Odunze isn't running that route, he doesn't gap Quay Walker, because
Yeah, that's fair.
Quay has to do a full turn to keep up with Rome, and Rome's feet have been too good. And that's suddenly a 20-yard play with a potential chunk for more if he gets there fast enough and gets
Yeah.
past a safety who's distracted. But it's just not what we're looking at.
And and it was a great ball too.
It
That was a
was.
great location on that ball. I have 2 other things with the Keenan thing. So one is if we can switch one read, like you're saying, like let's say Keenan isn't the first read, right? On one play, Robert. And
Hmm.
again, I know like it's so easy to do this in
Oh, you're going to go with the last one?
the last play. Roman Dunze, y'all, had a great stem. And again, they brought lots of pressure and he's way up in the middle of the field. It's probably a touchdown for being honest. Um,
The Bears
but
haven't been, in my opinion, that's the only play, honest to God, Nick, that I will like defend. The Bears have not been a team to try to take a deep chunk in a
no,
blitz situation. Maybe one day we'll get there, but right now I don't mind Caleb audibling to max protect and understanding, hey, I'm trying to get to a hot route. I would have loved for Keenan or for Caleb, for Keenan to get in and out of his route sooner so that
yes.
it's a little quicker, but we don't get to choose.
No, we
And
don't get. Here's the other one too. And maybe one of the more puzzling things of this season, Robert. I don't have an answer for this, and maybe you'll have an answer. Maybe listeners will have an answer for this one. Okay, so Chicago's 4-6 now, right? So at this point, playoffs are pretty bleak. We still want to develop Caleb. We're thinking about the future, right? Would it be the time to start developing, start figuring out an answer to Tyler Scott? Why is Tyler Scott not getting reps at receiver? Why is DeAndre Carter getting reps over him? He's active. We see him out there. And to see, hey, is this going to be maybe wide receiver 3 next year, wide receiver 4? If not, then we have to address that. Like, I think that's something that sometimes I mean, you can't tell me Tyler Scott maybe doesn't get past Quay Walker there either.
yeah, I mean, like, hey, I love the speed element, Nick. Like, you're
Right.
talking to a guy who's a big fan of the speed element. I
Yeah.
was one of the last people off the Valus train. If you can run quick, I
Can
will take time.
I have another gripe of Keenan. And again, y'all, I love Keenan. Okay.
He's a great football player. He's
Right.
way
Right.
more accomplished than you and I will ever be in the
Right.
NFL. So don't hear
Well,
any
we're
of
not
this as
we're not getting to
disrespect.
the NFL.
I know. I'm more pointing
But I
out that like
but I got
all of this is to say, Nick, I think sometimes people in our position can come across almost disrespectful when we're
oh,
saying,
no.
hey, the Bears have a number 9 overall pick. And Nick, when I watch this kid move, he's playing like it. And you make a play like he did on 4th and 3, that's a promotion play. Like you
Yep.
got to get him a bigger
Yep.
slice of the pie. Also, Nick, did you realize Rome, if memory serves, is the leading receiver on the team?
Mhm.
Like he
Mhm.
has the lead. I think it's the least targets if you count. So Keenan's missed 3 games, which throws the target balance off. Keenan gets more targets in each game he plays than any other receiver on the Bears. But did you know Rome is working on like an 8 yard per attempt clip? He's ahead of DJ significantly, and Keenan is significant third. So like Rome is productive. Rome passes the eye test. Rome is the future. It's the kind of thing where, Nick, I cock my head and I go, so what's holding us back? Like, is it
Mhm.
money? Is it that Keenan is a very vocal locker room leader? You can't demote the locker room leader? Because something's happening here. This kid's playing too well to only get the target share he does. But
Mhm.
maybe I'm out of my mind.
So, but here's the other thing that I was gonna say in terms of Keenan that,
Please.
um and again, like I said, like, totally respect Keenan Allen, and I like the leadership aspect of him and Caleb. I can see them talking on the sideline, trying to find answers. I don't know if you saw this, Robert, but I see multiple run blocking plays where he doesn't finish or he's not Rome really gets after it in the run blocking, and I know Keenan helped on the touchdown to Swift, y'all. I get it. It's here and there, but there's other ones where if he would finish this, we're getting 5 more yards. He would get his, steer the guy a different way, we get more yards. So there's another aspect there. To your point, Robert, I have a yards per target stat up, I can tell you. So of the receivers, um, Rome is tied for the lead, and this is just for fun, with Valus Jones for 8 yards per target as for receivers. DJ's 6.3. Allen is 5.0. DeAndre Carter is 5.1. Shockingly, Cole Kmet is 9.7 and Swift is 7.6. And what you have with Swift, Odunze, and Kmet is you have more speed likely than Keenan. Now, again, DJ has speed, but they're screening the heck out of him. That's why his yards per target is low.
I also look, we're 26 minutes into this show. I am not trying to take a long time to say this, Nick, but like, I mean, what's the nice way to say that you never want to start asking questions about a player's buy-in or their effort or their body language, but DJ has not gotten that monkey off his back and has a couple plays in this last game where we're like, DJ, what are you doing, my guy? Like, did you see the one where the Bears throw a screen to DeAndre Swift and DJ outside releases and I guess technically he's trying to influence block the guy, but
Yeah.
then he just walks 10 yards off the ball and stands still as the guy who did not follow him runs up and makes the tackle. It's like
Yeah.
there's some of this stuff, Nick, where you go, I mean, you can do this because you're extended. Like the Bears would have to eat so much dead money that if they cut you because they didn't like you that much, you'd still be set for life. So maybe there's a little bit of that, but like Nick, there's 10 sometimes there are 10 guys trying and one guy whose foot is not on the gas.
Yeah.
And I just
I
think
mean,
that's
I
tough.
I agree with you. I think it was better this game than other games.
It
The
was.
one the one thing that's interesting about DJ is I've always found this as a thing on film. It never looks like he's running fast. He's one of those guys where it
That
doesn't
too. For
look
sure.
like. So sometimes I think the effort thing that might be part of it because it's like, man, is he even running? Like the one play on third down where in the end zone where Caleb throws it to Rome, try to back end zone it instead of hitting DJ on the crosser for a first down. And I'm like, man, DJ, is he even like hustling across there? And then you like look at the other guys, you're like, yeah, actually he's moving fast, but he never looks like he's running
That
fast.
too. Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it.
Maybe it's part of it. More all of this to wrap up and say you've got some really productive receivers, and we could build an offense out of Cole Kmet, Roma Dunze, who's won me over, and also
Mhm.
checkdowns. Checkdowns are okay when you got a guy like DeAndre Swift. Check it down, give him
Dude,
7 yards of space. Did you see? I know you did. Did you see that move he put on Xavier McKinney? That was
Xavier McKinney
filthy.
Xavier McKinney doesn't even touch him. And if you need to believe checkdowns are an effective thing, watch Green Bay. Green Bay's
Yeah.
entire passing game was 2 deep shots to Christian Watson and checkdowns, and they ate up the Bears all day.
When your running back gets enough space to break a tackle, we saw this with David Montgomery. The moment you break that first tackle, NFL defenses are strung out. They always are. They
Mhm.
didn't have multiple men to commit to everybody. So if your running back gets enough space to beat the first guy, there's nobody home. And at
Yep.
that point, it's a scramble. I'll also hand it to him. Like, truly, DeAndre Swift's $8 million a year contract is always going to make it. I'm going to be blunt, Bears fan. He's always going to make it a love-hate relationship. The games where Swift doesn't deliver, you go, dadgum, he's expensive. The games where he does, you go, okay, this guy can play. And he plays a fairly unorthodox style of running back. I think you'd agree to that, Nick. Like, he's the least running backy running back that you're going to watch. And I mean that nicely. But, dude, he breaks past Braxton, and he's already throwing a high step because he sees McKinney and knows he's the only guy to beat. Like, kudos to Swift. Nick, I want to put you to the test. I believe that DeAndre Swift has made the two most important individual plays of the season so far on offense. Can you name plays that were more important than the 3 tackle break 56-yard touchdown run to Washington that basically catalyzed an attempt at winning, and that move to Xavier McKinney, which takes a 15-yard gain and makes it a 39-yard touchdown?
Well, I think his other run against LA might be even better, where it's a touchdown we needed to answer to win that game as well.
So maybe that's 3 then. Like
I'm not sure anyone else. Man, it's tough to name them, to be honest, because
there are plenty of sweet throws. There are
yeah,
definitely some awesome Caleb Williams moments,
yeah.
but I think the one that really sticks with me. So beating McKinney's awesome. It began. I personally think that one of the most impressive plays that a Bears offensive player had made all season in Washington got erased by the Hail Mary and Caleb Williams being part of the comeback, because Swift breaks a tackle at the line of scrimmage, a tackle as he's bouncing the edge, and then another tackle at about the 8-yard mark, and then takes it to the house from there. The whole knock on him had been he doesn't break any tackles, and suddenly he chains 3 together. Dude, you break 3 tackles in an NFL uniform without breaking speed or without losing speed, you're going to the house.
Mm.
Like, there's just not enough guys
Well,
left.
he's been really good in the screen game too. Like, I mean, to me, at this point, he went from like a bust free agent signing to this is working out pretty
We're
well.
cooking. Like
Yeah.
this Swift is a weird player. I will never pretend he's let me okay, Bears fan, when I say he's a weird player, let me outline in a perfect metaphor what I'm talking about. I know in your bones when you watch Roshan Johnson, you go, hot damn, this guy's good, right? Because that's a running back's running back.
Yeah.
That's lower your pads and blow somebody up. That's go get those yards. That's that
Mhm.
Zeke, like, let's eat kind of thing. Swift is not that guy. But man, Nick, like you're talking about, you give him the ball on one of these little slip screens, and if the line gets a piece of anybody, he's good for 8 yards. If he breaks one tackle or one linebacker takes a wrong angle, blow it up to 19 yards.
Mhm.
2 guys screw up, we're cracking 35 at this point. Like he creates a lot of yardage when he
Well,
gets
I
to the second level.
I would even classify DJ as not a wide receiver. Wide receiver. DJ's more of like the Debo Samuel type receiver, where you saw it, where that screen he had no business getting those yards. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a running back, and I'm gonna wait for my blockers and sit and wait and break tackles." And even on hitches, he catches it and he like lowers his shoulder and he carries the guy for 3 or 4 yards. Like, he's not your typical receiver either, y'all. And that's why it's fun. The mix that we have, I think, is a good mix. And we were talking about that. It hasn't really come to fruition, but we have some unorthodox guys, but I think it's gonna help Caleb a lot more in the long term. I do think at this point, 30 minutes in, we should pivot to the defense, Robert. Um, I thought Kevin Byard was impressive. There's some things he could have done better, but I thought he was impressive in this game. Um, Jalen Johnson did not have his best game. My most annoying thing from the defense, besides not getting pressure on the quarterback, is Jalen Johnson. I saw Elijah Hicks. I saw Stevenson. I saw Tremaine Edmonds a lot. Um, they wait on tackling guys, and it gives the opponent more yardage, and they don't go low. And to me, that's one of the most annoying things in coaching is when you don't close the gap. If there's 5 yards, let's close it to 3. Then you can settle your feet, and then you can make the tackle. But at least you save 2 yards. And they don't do that often. They just sit and wait, and they don't want to allow a big play.
It's a coaching point. Like, okay, we are pretty measured people. I like to think that you and I just did a whole 30 minutes displaying just how measured we are, talking about the good, talking about the bad. It is hard to not sound hyperbolic when talking about Matt Eberflus because, Nick, I've been holding in 2.5 years of philosophical disagreement with the way that Matt Eberflus coaches, and the record is getting so bad, whether it's one score games, whether it's late reversals, whether it's how many fourth quarter lead changes go against you compared to for you, that now, yeah, 100%. You want to bring up his style of defense? I hate this patient, almost passive method of
Yep.
defense. When you
Yep.
play, we're going to wait for the other team to make a mistake. Maybe they won't. What if they don't? What's your plan if they don't?
Yep.
Because the answer can't be 15 and a half yards a pass. And even if you take away Love's two huge completions, the answer can't be 10 yards a pass. Like,
Yep.
pass attempt. He had four incompletions. Like, and I can't, ugh, it doesn't help anything, Nick, that I also still think that he deploys his guys in ways that make life harder for them. For instance, I doubt you cared because you have been very rational about just how bad Tyreek Stevenson has been in any catch man or any zone scenario, because that's
Uh-huh.
just not his game. And he's
Mhm.
been unacceptably bad in those situations. Did you notice that they split Romeo Dobbs out to ISO him on 4th and 6? They gave Stevenson a press man assignment and he strapped him in the end zone. Shocker. Some of these
Mhm.
guys are good at things that they just aren't asked to do all that often. And
Yep.
when you let them do it, they play better. How about
Mhm.
that?
Well,
Jalen.
one thing that bugged me just about the game plan in general
Mhm.
is so, y'all, we saw Green Bay motion mainly Jaden Reed all the time, and
All the time.
it's to see man zone tells. Okay, Chicago was in so much man, they started doing man beaters and just roasting them all the time. It's like, why don't you switch? You know what I mean? You could do that too. The guy motions, right? Even if the guy follows, then he'll take the slot and the other guy will take the motion guy, like things like that. So that at least they are in better leverage situations. But they didn't, Robert. I mean, it wasn't even just Kyler Gordon. I saw Johnson following, I saw Terrell Smith following, and they're just out of position all the time. And I'm like, why would you continually let LaFleur dial up stuff and not disguise it?
Speaking of out of position, we might as well just say it, right? So I think Jalen Johnson's amazing. If you are a truly transcendent football player where no bad matchups exist, you're that guy, and there's no two ways about it. Jalen Johnson's extremely good. He's not matchup proof. And
Yep.
Christian Watson, I think, is as bad a matchup as you could ask for when it comes to Jalen Johnson. A big enough guy to handle Johnson's physicality, but also fast enough to run away from him, and against a team with a good enough offensive line to where you know you'll get 3.5 to 4 seconds to just run away from Jalen Johnson. I get it. Everybody's talking about how Christian Watson's catch may not have been a catch. And honestly, Nick, I cannot believe that Elijah Hicks, NFL starting safety, loses the ball like that when he's in perfect position for what at least has to be a pass
Bad.
defense. But that
Yep.
aside, that is how you play Jalen. And the only problem, to give you a little breadcrumb, is that if Christian Watson's a bad matchup, well, there's a matchup looming that's like the Christian Watson archetype at its peak. So that's great. I don't know what Justin Jefferson's plan is,
Yeah.
but
Well, like there's another one too. Like, you're talking about Jalen Johnson, and did you the I'm sure obviously you saw this on the 3rd and 10 where he is disguised and coming back in terms of I would call it a cover 9, but he's a cover 2. He's the deep safety, and he sits 8 yards behind Christian Watson. There's no other receiver deep, and he sits, and Kyler Gordon is being high load by the flat guy. I understand this, but why isn't Jalen Johnson closing on the guy, and then they convert the first down? I was just like, what are you sitting there for?
it's a spot
It
drop zone defense, man. The
it made no
difference
sense. At
the
some point, you have to pick up the guy in your zone, and he didn't.
I agree with you, and so did Sean Desai, and so did Vic Fangio, and so did Chuck Pagano. But that's just never been how Eberflus's defense has played. I mean, going back to the Chiefs game last year, they did the same thing where they would let people just break in front of them, and they'll get there when the ball is thrown. It's like they aren't allowed to trigger out of their zone until they see the ball out of their guy or out of the quarterback's hand, because that's generally when you see this stuff.
Yeah. They
But
they were about, what, a yard or a step and a half, I think, from breaking that ball up.
yep, but we would rather let Jordan Love make a mistake. And hey, Nick, you got one,
You got
right?
one.
I mean, you got one. And I would argue you even got a second, because I still don't know what LaFleur was thinking on 4th and 6. But every play between those two, dude, hard defense to watch,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, and also we talked about this on Sunday, our pod. Why are you bringing 7? When it's 2nd and 6 on the 24 and they need a touchdown, why are you so aggressively bringing that many guys? I mean, you watched it. Why?
I thought personally that that was one of those calls where somebody went, "Oh, Jordan Love really struggles against the blitz. Why haven't we blitzed him?" And then they just put in a blitz. Like they're flailing. They're somewhere between desperate and lost, and you put the play call in because the other stuff hasn't worked. But in my opinion, Nick, the problem is like, okay, if we were Packers fans, we'd be saying LaFleur had Flus in a blender because that's what it is. Right? That when you start to draw out a call like that, you've got the other defensive coordinator right where you want him. They punished it.
Well, and then here's the other part too is like in terms of utilizing your personnel, which bugs me. And then I'm going to talk about disappointing Bears defensive guys. Then we can move on to Minnesota. Is so on that 3rd and 10 call that I just talked about in terms of Jalen Johnson in his zone deep and not triggering or not closing the gap on Christian Watson who catches it for a first down. This is on I think the interception drive, I think. But anyways, the D end in there is 3rd and 10, DeMarcus Walker. I didn't see Darrell Taylor or Austin Booker. Like, look, the pass rusher's in. Nothing against Walker, but like we could save him there, right? And then you go to um the run for a touchdown from Josh Jacobs, and it's Darrell Taylor, Chris Williams, Brian Coward, and Jacob Martin in there. And I'm like, that's your pass rushing D line. Like, it didn't make sense. Here's some PFF grades, Robert, of defenders that we have highly paid or drafted. So Jalen Johnson was a 57.9.
Tough.
Kyler Gordon, 45.3.
Really bad.
I mean, this one, Elijah Hicks was 44.4, which makes me wonder why Jonathan Owens isn't getting more snaps. But anyways, Chris Williams, 37.5. I mean, I'm sure you saw this multiple times. He was the one tech.
Yep.
What?
They don't have one. They found out
Tremaine
last
Edmonds.
week. They found out last week Zach Pickens wasn't that guy. But just
Yeah.
because here's the problem, Nick. It's the same thing that you hear fans talk about with the offensive line. Just because you're smart enough to acknowledge that Sam Mustipher isn't a good center, Coleman Shelton in the current iteration of this,
Mhm.
doesn't mean his backup is better than him. And just because you acknowledge that Zach Pickens can't play one, doesn't mean Chris Williams can either. Ryan, Matt, this is why we tried to tell you to find another defensive
Yeah.
tackle.
I mean,
But
there was something we were worried about for weeks.
gotta listen to
Um,
the pod.
Tremaine Edmonds, big money guy, 35.2. Darrell Taylor, 31.3. We were pumped about him early in the season. Man, he did not play well. And Austin Booker, 31.1. So overall, a lot of defenders did not play well. And it showed. I mean, I saw it all over the tape. It was a lot of bad defense, I thought. And honestly, I felt we were lucky to not allow more points.
I mean, I would even credit the offense, right? Offense
Mhm.
had 36 minutes time of possession. Why was this not a bloodbath? Because Green Bay got 6 drives. 6 drives. 20 points per drive, or 20 points, which is like a little over 3 points per drive, is considered pretty good. In
Yeah.
most games, you get about 9 or 10 drives. So that's the equivalent of averaging about 30 points, which most people
Di-
would say is quite a good offensive day.
Didn't they have 5 in the red zone?
Yeah, they got to the red zone on 5 drives. So they were cooking, dude. They were
Yeah.
cooking. Like, there's no
Okay.
way to spin this where they weren't cooking. Credit to the offense. The way that I would put it, like truly, is the Bears offense just evened the game consistently. And when you do that, you make it hard for the other team to emotionally run away with the game. They ran away with the game statistically, but why did it feel so even? Because the Bears offense felt equally dangerous to Green Bay, which sounds weird coming out of my mouth, and statistically they weren't, but the Bears
Right.
were finding ways to create scoring drives and keep the game tilted in their favor, which is great. It just doesn't make the defense better than they were. Does that make sense,
Mhm.
Nick?
Oh,
And
yeah.
and
100%.
I'm disappointed because in my opinion, this is my take. I've watched too many Jonathan Gannon games. Too many. Which is closer to like 6, right? I've watched too many Brian Flores games. And Nick, you can tell me about their EPA per plays. I get it. But Jonathan Gannon is working with a team full of nobodies and nothing as a pass rusher, and his defense is not awful. If you gave Flus the players that Jonathan Gannon is working with, we'd be throwing our hands in the air and saying, well, he's not working with anything, so why would you expect this to be any good?
Yeah.
And we are hitting the point where we are testing Flus with normal NFL guys and some really good players, and the scheme is falling apart because it's not stacked to the gills with talent right
Yep.
now. And
Yep.
I think that's disappointing because Minnesota is working with one pass rusher. And it's not Dallas Turner. Like
Right.
he's they're working. I mean, they just cut their first round pick earlier this season because he wasn't playing well enough. They've
Mhm.
got Harrison Smith. I get it. They've got we could go through the Vikings roster and I'm sure we will. It's not like they've got a bunch of bad players, Nick, but the scheme is favorable enough that it puts your defensive players in position to play well instead
Mhm.
of asking them to be world beaters, which I do feel like this scheme does a lot, right? And then the Green Bay rolls into town and they just run up and down the field on you. And
Mhm.
if that happens for the next 7 games, I don't know how Flus makes an argument to Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren, and George McCaskey that he's the right guy to lead the team going
Right.
forward.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the only thing you think that saves him is if you play outside and it's cold weather, which can help in terms of teams making mistakes, but that's about it. So, all right, let's move on to Minnesota.
Can I
Um,
quickly inject one other thing, by the way? So, for any Bears fan who listened to this and is about to turn off because you don't care about listening to the preview, first of all, hey, I see you. Don't do that. This one's going to be really good. But second of all, the most important thing, Bears fan, if you don't care about the playoffs and you're just in this for Caleb or you're just in this cuz you watch the Bears and you don't get enough Bears games, here's the most important thing to be thinking about, okay? And Nick, I'm going to inject a little drama into your week,
oh
right?
boy.
Because this is a little dramatic, but I do think it's true. For better or for worse, NFL head coaches don't have time to watch the Bears like Nick Whalen, Robert Schmitz, and you, listener, do. Most of the time, these guys will review the games after the fact, but when they're scrolling through their Twitter, because yes, they have them, whatever is the current floating around take of the week gains more ground than we want to admit. Cole Kmet said it himself when the Bears went to lunch, like the team captains went to lunch with Caleb Williams, and Cole said it himself when he said, I'd heard a lot of things about Caleb Williams, but I met him and he was a totally different guy." And I'm like, "Okay, so clearly these guys read the press clippings about what the greater narrative is about these guys."
Hmm.
If you followed me to this point, the next 7 games, if you think the Bears are firing Matt Eberflus, are an audition to the next head coach. You still want the team to look playable because if Caleb Williams looks like a mess, he might be fine statistically. Like his season matches up with plenty of other successful rookies to this point. But if he looks great for the next 7 games, Chicago becomes the destination.
Yep.
Like nobody really wants to work with Mitch Trubisky. I know the Bears ended up finding somebody, but when you've got a second-year quarterback that is great, you can potentially recruit the best offensive coach that's out there, or the best coach, period. If you've got a guy that's pretty good, I mean that's great, but I didn't draft Josh Rosen. Like you start to open that door, right, Nick? Where I don't think that's gonna
Well,
happen to Caleb Williams.
well,
It's not.
look at the Chargers, Robert. Right? You got Justin Herbert, and and Harbaugh's like, well, he wanted to stay in the West Coast, but also like, hey, I can have this. That's the other part. Bears fans are like, we could have had Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh wanted to be in the West Coast. Okay, that the Stanford job, San Diego job, 49ers job. Like he's gonna stay out there. But anyways, Justin Herbert's there. That's really appealing, right? Like, hey, I can have this quarterback. Like if he like look think of the hype also with free agency, Robert,
Mm-hmm.
for Houston. Danielle Hunter wants to go there. Stephon Diggs wants to get traded there. Like you get all of that hype too. Even if the Bears don't make the playoffs or whatever, you get the positive momentum. People are going to want to come to Chicago. It's going to flip the script.
And so, because of that, these next games matter, even if only so that, like, let's use an example, Nick. If the Bears roll up against the Vikings and they get just shuttered on both sides of the ball, so they end up like a 27-6 kind of game, That's, in my opinion, the worst case scenario. I mean, they'll still have plenty of weeks to write the end of season narrative, but you want to lose with a respectable offensive showing because you want this quarterback to build some momentum as we go
Yep,
forward. Hey, you said at the start of the show yourself, this season's about developing Caleb Williams.
it
Well,
is.
right now, Caleb needs to show that he's developing. Not for my sanity, though I'd love it. Not for your sanity, Nick, but so that if the Bears make the coaching change that I think guys like you and me are expecting them to make, that we have as attractive a landing spot as possible. I don't want a coach to have to think, okay, so my job is to fix Caleb Williams. I want that coach thinking, I get to play with Caleb Williams. And
Mhm.
once I put this in, we are going to kill. That's my dramatic segue as we get into the Vikings game.
I'm with you, man. I'm still looking forward to the season, and last week helped out quite a bit. Minnesota offensively, we'll go some broad numbers, and then we'll talk a little bit more of the individual players. They rank 16th offensively, ninth in passing, 30th in rushing. So again, bringing in Aaron Jones has not flipped that running game, and they've really struggled there historically under Kevin O'Connell. 10th in points per game, 14th in points per drive, which is worse. That means they have more drives than actually they're being productive or efficient during the drives. I thought this was interesting, Robert. I did some other breakdowns I don't normally do. First 6 games, Minnesota was rolling. Remember? 6-0,
Yes.
28 points per game. Last 4 games, 19.
Hmm.
And y'all, let's talk about the defenses they played the last 4 games. LA Rams, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans. Chicago's faced them. I would say of those, Tennessee was probably the best defense. I know the Rams can get a pass rush, but none of those are juggernaut defenses. But they've dropped 9 points per game, which I thought was big. Then 2 other stats, Robert, and I'll give it to you. They rank 13th in third down percentage and 14th in red zone percentage.
It's so funny. You read the stats, and that matches the eye test, if you ask me. This Vikings team is a really well coached unit that has some weapons that they can use in their favor. But for as many Vikings fans will try to tell me otherwise, I just don't buy, Nick, that they are as talented as their record suggests that they are. That's not me saying they're a bad football team. They can beat you in a lot of ways, but Nick, they're just not dominant at anything, right? And so they can scheme up a wide open 97-yard touchdown, of which Sam Darnold has hit quite a few so far this season. But
They went against them last week too.
right, they just aren't. They aren't the offense that their highlights says they are. And the proof is in the pudding because they're struggling to score as there's more and more tape and more tendency hunting that's out there. Now, that said, the Bears' defensive line has me pretty worried. We didn't talk about guys we liked on defense last week. I thought Javon Dexter has quite a couple of really nice pass rush moments. The problem is Sweat looks real hurt. Like, in my opinion, Sweat looks limited. And I love a gritty player. Like, Sweat and Darnell Wright both suffer from fans getting angry at them because they're gutty enough to play
Yep.
while they're hurt. But this does mean that the Bears have lost quite a few fangs in what I think has been really hurting Minnesota because I don't need to tell you, Nick, but for those that weren't paying attention, their star left tackle, Christian Darrisaw, is hurt. He's done for the season. And unshockingly, it was right around when he got hurt that their offensive production
Yes.
fell off a cliff because
Yep.
you lose somebody like that, man, and a
I
lot
mean,
goes out
he's
the window.
he's elite. Elite, y'all. Like one of the best young tackles in the league, and not even a question. And they have a good right tackle in Brian O'Neill. But the rest of that O line, Garrett Bradbury is, I would say, solid to good for a center, but he's not a difference maker. He's not Creed Humphrey. The rest of that O line is just eh. And then
And
when you don't have the O line, as we know, it hurts the whole
I
offense.
was going to say, Nick, Bears fan, you of all people have to know how these offensive line holes almost create like an exponential increase in pressure. Does that make sense, Nick? If you've got
Yeah.
one offensive line hole that you're working around, you may not actually allow any pressure, hole or not, because you can cover one. Once you have two holes, you're going to allow quite a bit of pressure. Once you allow three, you may not block anybody all day. Once you allow four, hang up the cleats or four true holes at offensive line. There's not much you're gonna be able to do. Once the Vikings lost Darisaw, they I think fell over the hill on what they could cover up. And now better defensive lines are giving them a real handful. But the problem being, you named a bunch of teams that have a pretty solid left rusher. Not the Titans, but like the Rams, very good left
Yes.
rusher. What were the other teams that you mentioned?
Oh, Colts,
Colts, like, and
Jacksonville.
if they didn't, like, Jacksonville can play a little bit, at least at edge. Colts and Titans not so much, but they've got dogs in the interior, so that
Yep.
stresses them there.
Right. Right.
The Bears kind of don't right now. So
Well, the best news about Minnesota is they don't have a running game to take advantage of the interior that's not good for the Chicago.
no, but it almost feels. Look, do you believe in the he's due thing? It's not
What?
really borne out in stats, like he's due, like that
Oh, he's
concept.
due. Yeah, yeah.
I don't you feel like Justin Jefferson is due one?
Well, I think it's regression to the mean. It's the same type of deal. But yes, I do think that. And so let's talk about some other things of the offense, like why it's been a little bit up and down for
Nick went, I
Minnesota.
don't really want to think about Justin Jefferson. Let's talk about something else. And I
Well, it
I
won't be him.
respect it.
It won't. Yeah, yeah, it won't be him. Um, but he missed a little bit of time with a hamstring.
Hmm.
Okay, Jordan Addison has missed some time, and they just got TJ Hawkinson back.
Hmm.
So in terms of like getting Jefferson free, and maybe they isolated him because he has more snaps than Addison. He didn't miss as much time, but like it's probably not as high flying offense. I know we talked about Darisaw. Then if you had Hawkinson the whole year,
Right.
Addison the whole year, and Jefferson was healthy the whole year, if that makes
And
sense.
let's talk about the other piece of this. I mean, so I think Kevin O'Connell has shown this year that he's a very, very good coach. I like a lot of his offensive ideas, and he gets the guys executing well. And I think we've seen that with Sam Darnold. Don't you think, Nick? Let me stop there. Would you agree with
I
this?
mean, I would say yes. You're making him look real good.
I agree. The problem is, I really believe that in the NFL, you can't mask a true talent deficiency forever. And we're getting close to midnight on Cinderella. I know Vikings Twitter would disagree. I know Vikings Twitter is like, no, 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 you don't understand. Sam's playing super well. And I'm like, I'm not anti Darnold. Like, I'm not sitting here trying to tank on Darnold, Nick. Darnold was playing at an MVP level in September. He is ever encroaching on that 18th ish that we know he's probably going to be. And that drop in efficiency is going to hit your offense really hard when you can't run the ball.
Well,
Like,
he's thrown 5 well, this last game was his best actually PFF score against Tennessee. The 2 weeks before, he threw 5 combined interceptions.
not
5.
great, dude. Not great. And again, I don't know if Sam Darnold, I mean, hey, maybe I'll eat my words on this. It'd be great if I did. I don't know if Sam Darnold's lollipopping a ball over his tight end into the waiting hands of a spot drop defender anytime soon. Like, that love gift was one of the worst I'd see. Actually, this is 2 weeks with just completely unexplicable interceptions. Drake May throwing a ball to TJ Edwards that cannot be thrown. Cannot be thrown. And
Are you talking into Flus's philosophy again?
no, I'm actually
It's
trying to say,
working?
I'm trying to make the argument, Nick, where I'm like, you don't even deserve these takeaways. Like a lot of the other takeaways that they generated last season and early this season, 100% deserved. Like you created the pressure, you stressed the margins, you forced a mistake, and you capitalized on it. These are just like, what is the quarterback doing? Too much dip on the chip. Like,
Too
what
much
are we
dip
trying?
too much dip on the chip. Um, Pivoting from Darnold, we mentioned this a little bit, but just the run game, y'all. So Aaron Jones, we know him very well. This is Aaron Jones's worst PFF grade of his entire career. And when you look at it from each category, his run, like rushing grade is his worst grade outside of run blocking, which he rarely has any snaps in that. His receiving score is his best score, which isn't shocking. And
No.
then his pass blocking is good as well. It's better than his run game, which, if you've been paying attention to the Vikings recently, that's why Cam Akers has been getting some love because the rushing hasn't gone well for Aaron Jones.
You know, it's so funny, right? You talk to Vikings fans, they love Aaron Jones right now. You talk to PFF scores, they don't. I haven't watched enough of it to know. I think Aaron Jones is one of my favorite running backs that I've watched over the last 8 years, but we're about that point where you should be slowing down. So if you told me that he's not playing very well, that's not shocking, is it? From an empirical perspective.
No,
Who knows? Aaron Jones has smoked the Bears almost every time I've watched him. Like, I don't
well,
think I've seen a game where the Bears bottled Aaron Jones. So maybe a different jersey does that for him. But that
week one last year was just those two screens, man.
he's amazing. He really is. Eh,
One final thought on the offense, sorry, Robert, is so tight ends. So TJ Hawkinson is back now.
mhm.
He's still playing at a really high level. I'm a big Hawkinson fan, but Josh Oliver, y'all, is a good underrated tight end as well. He's ranked ninth right now. Both of them are good run blockers. So if you're looking for what Minnesota could do running or what's going to help them, it might be on the perimeter and not up the middle.
How do you feel about this? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb in the middle against in terms of the Bears matchup against this Vikings offense.
I mean, the Bears aren't playing well right now on defense. So
It's
I'm
a
going thumbs
thumb
down.
down for everybody.
I mean, how would you be confident when the pass rush isn't there? They can't stop the run from anybody, and Arizona, New England, and Green Bay were just marching on the field on them.
I would like to be proven wrong, to just add on to what you're saying. Like, I don't say this with intent to be a hater. It's not fun to talk about this. But Nick, I mean, the loss of Brisker feels obvious, especially because I'm with you. I like Jonathan Owens. Like,
Yep.
I think he can play, but the longer we keep playing Hicks, the worst part is, Nick, I don't know if you've seen this, but I know I have, is a lot of players when they first enter the game, they'll bring an extra juice off the bench where it's like they're stoked to be playing, nobody's really studied their tendencies, and then as time progresses, it looks like they revert into who they were, but it's more like teams catch up to what that player's doing different and start to punish and stress that player, put them in the same binds they used to be. As Elijah Hicks goes back into being the player who I know him to be, it's like, oh, this is hard to watch because if you at least make the Packers earn it on that deep ball down the field,
Right.
then maybe the game's a little different. Maybe. But the philosophy doesn't work if you just let them bomb you over the top. And I like Kevin Byard. There's not like some crazy butt coming, Nick. He's just not super duper fast laterally. And this is the
Not
kind
anymore.
of this is the kind of team with Addison and or with Addison and Justin Jefferson that will stress you up those vertical seams. And I don't love that. Like this matchup, and obviously the one coming next week, and frankly the one after that. Like they're just it's brutal, dude. It's
Ro-
brutal. Because it's just
Robert, you just talked up getting people hyped up for the rest of the last few games. You
for
can't
the
do that.
offense. For the offense. Like, because what I'm trying to say here, Nick, is like I we liked a lot of the Bears matchups early in the season. These are all the hard matchups. Like
I
defense to
know.
offense, they would have been hard with the starters. Now you don't have a lot of the starters, and it feels like the Bears are quickly sliding. Would love for Flus to prove. I'll be interested to see if Flus proves me wrong. The joke in there is like, if Flus proved me wrong, you'd put me in a real bind where I'd be like, oh
No.
no,
It's
don't make me
it's not
question what to
happening.
do with the coach
Stop.
at the end of the season.
Stop. So, okay, a couple other small things before we move to Minnesota's defense. Elijah Hicks did not practice today, so who knows if even if he'll be healthy or active with that ankle. And then I just talked him up, but Josh Oliver didn't practice with a wrist slash ankle, which is weird because those aren't on the same area of the body. So he has 2 different injuries is my guess. Sam Darnold was limited with a foot. Aaron Jones is a full participant with some ribs. Those are their offensive injuries. Minnesota's defense, Robert, very, very interesting. Okay, y'all. Defense, they rank first. Pressure percentage, first. Blitz percentage, first. Pass defense, seventh. If that's even like, oh, wow, look, there's a weakness. They're seventh. Run defense, first. Points per game, fourth. Points per drive, second. Third down percentage, seventh. Red zone percentage, 21st. Percentage of drives ending in a turnover, first. They forced a turnover in every game. Percentage of drives ending in a score, second. Now, Robert, I'm going to give you one more stat that might give you a little bit of hope, y'all, because you heard all that. And you're like,
It's
ugh.
pretty bad.
Yeah, they're pretty good. You know, what's that one? Pretty good. You know. So they played, quite a few games this season. Teams that have gained less than 300 yards on them: Giants, Houston. Houston was early in the season. They had 296. Jets, Colts, Jaguars, Titans. Okay. So those 6 teams had less than 300 total yards. Points per game in those 6 games, 11. Now, in the 4 other games, when teams got more than 300 yards on them: San Francisco, Green Bay, Detroit, the Rams, average 27 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my little thing. Last year, people were like, well, Chicago played a bunch of bad quarterbacks, and that's why their defense looked good. Or even this year, right? Which I would say, maybe. But that's what's happening with Minnesota right now, because they have faced a lot of the worst teams or offenses in the NFL. And then I would say San Francisco this season, Green Bay, Detroit, and the Rams. Detroit, yes. The other ones have been good. They haven't been great. They're not the most elite offenses, and they're averaging 27 points per game. So it's a pretty big difference, and it's going to be curious where you're going to put Chicago in that realm of offenses
And
right now.
it's hard to make a judgment too, because this fits Flores' philosophy. Flores wants to dominate you. Flores doesn't want to give up 17 points. He wants to give up 0, right? Like
Mhm.
Flores' aim is, if I can create a turnover and allow 0 points in a game, like turnover on every drive, we're going to try to. So you do. The problem is, like you're talking about, Nick, if you can get an edge against this Flores defense, it will count like 3 against the Flus defense, where once you get a little, you can take a lot from it. And so, like you're saying, if you're good enough to beat the defense, you will rock it. But if you're not good enough to break through, you may not all game. Just about. Until I'm proven otherwise. It's probably safest to assume that the Bears are in the first category, don't you think? I would love for them to prove otherwise. But don't you think it's safest to assume that at least in their first meeting that this may be the rough one? What do you think?
I'm calculating it up. I have another thing I think that'll be interesting. Let me see if I agree this one is likely going to be more rough. Um, the only thing I think that helps right now is I was shocked. The one thing I was the most concerned about last game was Caleb getting hit a bunch, because the Bears have not picked up the blitzes and the stunts, and Green Bay generally always has pressure on them, and he didn't. So I wonder if I don't do I have to compliment Chris Morgan on this podcast? I don't
Oh,
know. I'm going to compliment Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown found a way to figure that stuff out last week, and that's the only thing that gives me hope. But I'm
you can
calculating something,
also
so you go now.
you can also go ahead and compliment the guy that deserves it, right? There's one name. You know it, but I'll say it for you. Braxton Jones probably played his best game as a Bear last week. I don't know what the PFF score was, and frankly, this is one of those moments where, Nick, I don't really care. Braxton Jones was the best run blocker on the field. for the Bears, certainly, and obviously murdered a man in the open field. But in pass pro, he was very dependable. And Darnell Wright is Darnell Wright. Like, I love Darnell Wright. I think Wright is the Bears' best pass blocker. But you felt, didn't you, Nick? You felt the impact of two tackles that
Oh,
did
100%.
their job.
Yep.
And the interior wasn't perfect, but or Roshan in many cases and Swift and a couple of others helped the interior survive. The tackles were on their own, but the tackles did their job, and the Bears made that work. This is where Rashad Grenard against who's he going to line up against? Like I literally
Well,
don't
well,
know.
well, hold on. That's another part of this is because Jake Curran, thanks, man. I mean, you didn't do great. You didn't do as bad as I thought it was going to be going in. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be rough. Tevin Jenkins was a limited participant.
Hmm.
Maybe he'll be back for, 1/3 of the game and then leave like he does every game. And honestly, y'all, that's not me hitting on Tevin. That's just reality. He's left what 5 of 6 games he's played this year. I don't know if just sit him and get him completely healthy, Robert, or we just keep doing this all year. I don't know.
By the way, Nick, not to change the subject, but I wanted to go back to something earlier. You talked about Flores and Caleb versus the Blitz. So my understanding is that Caleb's numbers against the Blitz this season overall are pretty bad. I believe they're really bad because he's taken enough sacks against the Blitz that they're netting out more than the touchdowns that he's not thrown. That if he'd thrown a bunch of touchdowns, they would even out with the sacks, and he ends up with a fairly negative EPA. Even though I can recount 4 weeks minimum where Caleb was dynamite against the Blitz, and that actually generated a lot of positive things for the Bears. Let me ask you this, Nick. You're an offensive guy, but for a brief moment, be a defensive coordinator, okay? You're playing a gotta have it down against Caleb Williams. Do you blitz him or do you drop eight if you're trying to stop the Bears right now?
I think I would drop because if you blitzed, he has the threat of running right now, which I think is not in your favor on defense.
I think the plays where Caleb has been at his worst, to bound off of your point, is where you can freeze Caleb and keep him in the pocket like a statue for the count of like 4 and 5 seconds. If you blitz him right now, you might get him. Certainly, he's a rookie quarterback. I'm not trying to tell you he's perfect against the blitz, but just like we saw with Keenan Allen, he seems like he has a better handle of how. Let me. All right, Nick, I know this is sort of
Well, I've got some grades for you on this
well, I
if you
want to hear
want.
the grades. I want to make this one point. Just this one. I know I said a lot, but I do mean it this time. I'm going to break a taboo. With Justin Fields, it felt like you could throw a blitz at Fields, and sometimes he wasn't even aware it was coming, right? Where he would drop back in the pocket like it was any other drop, and you saw it first play of the Minnesota game where he just got destroyed on a play behind him that he did not seem to have any awareness of blitz was coming. With Caleb, I don't know if you're feeling this, Nick. Caleb knows the blitz is coming. He recognizes when
Yeah.
he's getting heated up. And this is the kind of game where if you throw a bunch of cover zero and the Bears' response is, what, F it, DJ's down there somewhere, you break enough of those plays off, you're going to push Minnesota out of this. And
Mhm.
this might finally be the meteorite Rome game we've been waiting for, where Caleb just drops balls out of the
Yeah,
skybox
maybe.
and Rome runs under it. To me, that's the best case scenario. What are
Yeah.
the stats?
Yeah. I've got 3 different things that I'm gonna piece together. So first off, Caleb's stats. So when he's kept clean in the pocket, his PFF grade is 76.1. Again, average y'all think 60.
But
So
that is pretty low for
76.1.
a clean pocket grade,
Good.
if memory serves. Right?
Under well, I'd have to look. I don't have
So
it ranked.
I think it
But
is. It's not me trying to
okay.
push it. It's more like my understanding is that most NFL quarterbacks are trying to be like an 80 when they're in the when they are clean. But
Actually,
what is
hold
he
on.
when he's blitzed?
Well, so hold on. So kept clean is 76.1 and the under pressure is 45.1. So massive difference.
Drop off.
But this is interesting though. When blitzed, 70.9.
That's very good.
Not blitzed, 60.2.
That's not great.
Interesting.
And
Um, the
that's what we're
other
talking about. When you blitz Caleb and you let him simplify right now he's playing better than when you don't blitz him and he tries to eat the whole pie. I think that's a rookie that I personally think that's evidence of a rookie quarterback that's trying to be Peyton Manning and is realizing you're not Peyton Manning yet.
Yeah.
And to make that comparison is a lot, dude. But it begs the question, doesn't it, Nick? Of most of the, like, okay, let me give you some homework and I'll stall as you do it, right? I want you to compare this to golf, where it's like, what are we seeing right now with you can pick golf or you can pick Love. Love might be a more favorable one because I know he's been pretty poor against the blitz this year. But pull another number, and I would be blown away if those numbers aren't flipped, where the unpressured value is closer to the 70 mark, and the blitzed value, the pressured value, is the one that drops to 70. Caleb is having a very unorthodox season, and I think that's okay. He's a rookie. You're riding the roller coaster.
You're right. Yeah, kept clean. People are 80s or better. So you're right there. Okay, so 2 other things. Pivoting back to, something I did a long time ago, was talking about the Minnesota Vikings defense, okay, and something I thought of when I was calculating. They allowed 15 points per game over the first 5 games of the season. They had a bye week. Afterwards, 19 points per game.
Hmm.
And if you're like, "Well, did they play better offenses?" Both remember I said there was 4 games where they allowed more than 300 yards? 2 of those games were early in the season, 2 of those were after the bye. So it evens out, y'all. And even in the first half of the season was the game against Houston, which was a bad game. So they're averaging 4 more points per game since the bye week. And then the other thing, Robert, is going back to O line. Okay, Tevin was limited. Ryan Bates DMP with a concussion. I thought I heard someone said he was out. We'll see. And then Karan Amagashi did not practice with a calf. So I'm not sure your answer on what the old line's going to look like. The other one of note is for the Bears is DeAndre Swift didn't practice with a groin that popped up. I didn't know anything about that until today.
I mean, you lay it down on the table that many times, it's bound to get strained. So I get it.
All the spins, man.
The yeah, I mean,
I
all that.
I am shocked, Robert, on the play where Xavier McKinney doesn't touch him, which I think is it's more funny because they gave him so much money. And he's been so hyped up in Green Bay that he didn't even touch Swift in that area. Is I am more shocked that DeAndre Swift didn't try to spin to beat him than I am McKinney didn't touch him.
It's a dirty move. Like it's really filthy. What the high step into the slam stutter, into the face cross, all the way around. Like that's that Oklahoma Drone magic where it's
Well,
like this guy's
did you see
work.
because the initial high step and stutter made McKinney go off balance already.
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, "Oh, he had him."
Oh, you gotta what? You gotta break him off balance and then you snatch the ankle. Like this was a drive at the top of the key that you just bury the
He
guy.
he hit a left hook, and then he's like, "Oh," and then he uppercut him. He's like,
Yep.
"Got him."
It's it's sweet. And speaking of, I know another thing that has really made the Vikings defense sing is that they have been money against the run, which is I don't think
Mhm.
that bodes super well for the Bears, who have been pretty
No.
poor running the ball. So if the Bears get put into a bunch of must pass situations, in my opinion, that's where you are living in Flores's world. Where Flores wants to basically get you to your hot route, figure out what it is, and exploit it for anything from a turnover to some really hard hits over the course of a game. We'll see if the Bears being at home can offer them any advantage when it comes to this kind of thing. But in my opinion, Nick, if we were going to go like you don't have to do a key to the game, but I'll do one, right? I think you have to find a deep shot early. Like you basically need to back this defense off a little bit, and then you have to generate some success running the ball. I don't care if it's 3 yards a pop. If that's all we can do and we can get to third and four, that's something. But the more third and tens you stack up, the more dangerous this is going to get. It's the wrong defense to let come after you like that.
Well, that's what I thought was the best part of the simple Thomas Brown game plan was they kept him out of 3rd and longs and made him 3rd and mediums. That's why they ran a hitch. here, uh, a flat route there, etc. My key to the game is, and so one thing to understand Minnesota's defense, y'all, it's done so well, and they do bring pressure, but they disguise everything. The safeties rotate. They, in terms of like who plays, in Minnesota, they have so many players that can play multiple positions. They normally play three safeties. They rotate a bunch. They have two linebackers that like to blitz a bunch up the middle, but they have lots of defensive linemen that they rotate and guys that will shift and back off and simulated pressures, et cetera, all the time. So the pre-snap look that you get
Mm-hmm.
is not with the post-snap look that you're going to get a lot. So my key to the game, Robert, is Caleb Williams' mind. If Caleb Williams is ready and he says, hey, this is going to disguise into that, and he knows where he wants to go with the football, because so far I've been very impressed with Caleb's how intelligent he is. And to me, the upstairs part of your quarterback is more important than almost anything else, because he hasn't made a lot of bad decisions as a rookie. He's held on to the ball, right? He's not been perfect, but he's made a lot of really good decisions, I think, and not put it in harm's way. And if he can be a step ahead, maybe even, hey, I understand what's going to happen here. I'm going to shift the protection here. If he can be a step ahead there, I really think can be in this game. If he gets really confused and Flores is in his bag, I think it could get really bad early.
Yep. And I think it would be strange if Caleb Williams did win that mental battle. Am I allowed to say that? That would be unusual. It would be just as unusual as a rookie almost beating the Packers last minute in a game where their defense got dusted. But that one happened. So,
Here's the one thing. Sorry, here's the one thing that's Will Levis threw for 261 last week on Minnesota. They almost lost to the Titans.
yep.
And that was when I'm like, what the heck, Will Levis? I'm
Well,
like, maybe Will Levis will throw for a bunch, but they'll get blown out. They lost by 10, and that was a game,
it's
y'all.
funny to talk about it. What's Levis good at? I'm completely serious. Quick release, strike deep. And
Yep.
he hit a couple of big deep balls early. This is the game where you have to get the sideline go working, which Flores wants, by the way. Unfortunately, you're playing into his game when you do that, but you have to hit the trick shot. And if you can hit it once or twice, you gain a ton of points and you make them honor something that they are explicitly trying not to honor, right? Like Flores' defense is the equivalent of somebody walking up into your face and hitting you with the double middle fingers and daring you to do something about it. And you
Yep.
have to do something about it one way or another. A lot of these teams, Nick, you've seen it. I know you have. This is very Jets, right? They're going to try to hit a swing pass. And you know what's going to happen? That safety's going to hunt that thing from 8 yards deep, and he's going to blow your guy up 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And the Vikings has you in the trap. That's the snare. You can't do that, right? At the risk of incompletions, you have to throw over the middle. You have to assault them deeper down the field. And you have to find ways to run the ball a little. And if you can do that, great. Wouldn't surprise me if this one, I don't know, you're talking me into the idea that the Vikings may unintentionally simplify the game plan for Caleb. So
Well,
maybe they just do a bunch of sims and drop everybody. We'll see.
maybe, yeah. I mean, the other thing to think about, like, because you're talking about beating them deep. I mean, I think that is the one area that you can go after. So when you look at their team, y'all, they signed Stephon Gilmore late. Again, 34-year-old corner. He's trying his best. I'm a big Stephon Gilmore fan, man, over the years, but he ranks 70th among corners in PFF, Robert. Uh, Byron Murphy Jr. normally plays the slot. He's 30th. Shaq Griffin, 78th. There are three safeties. Harrison Smith, y'all, is almost 36. He ranks 55th. Cameron Bynum is 37th. Josh Metellus, who likes to play strong safety, run, blitz a lot, he's 31st. None of those guys are playing out of their mind right now. They're playing solid, but I just said the top one of all of their defensive backs is 30th right now. And I've been talking about their first in this, first in that, first in that. That doesn't say first to me. So if you're going to beat them, you're going to pass down the field. Their linebackers, Blake Cashman is 8th. He's done really well with everything as a free agent. Ivan Pace Jr., people were loving him. Remember that one, Robert?
Mm-hmm.
He ranks 46th among linebackers.
Great for
And then,
UDFA.
Yep. Their best guy besides Cashman, who ranks 8th, is Jonathan Grenard, free agent acquisition. He's 14th. So really, it's just a cast of misfit toys that he knows what you do best, and he lets you go and do it. So if you're going to win, I think it's going to be down the field, and you're going to have some plays made. Do you have a prediction? It's been a while since we've done this, Robert.
I know we've kind of been too bummed out. I mean,
Yeah.
especially because I think the funny part is it's like, okay, well, what would we have predicted? What'd you miss? Right? You missed us both saying into the camera, you have to beat New England. You
Yep.
can't lose to New England. Like, this team is too good to lose to New England and for that to be acceptable. And then you missed us both saying, Packers are going to beat us. Maybe it'll be
Yep.
fun, but they're going to win.
Yep.
So, going into this game, I'll tell you what, Nick, on paper, I think that the Bears should probably lose like 27-10, but I don't think that's going to be the game. I don't think the Vikings are playing well enough right now. Where if I just marry up what I think is going to happen, I wouldn't be surprised if this is another game that is unnecessarily tight, right? I don't know what's going to do that. I mean, for all I know, we could end up with a game where Sam Darnold and Aaron Jones blow a mesh point, and it just bounces to Javon Dexter, and that's the only reason it's close at all. But that does happen. Like, it's the NFL. One bounce of the football could completely twist things. So when all is said and done, I think it'll be 23-17 Vikings. But if it ends up closer to on paper, that'll be a shame. It won't be unexpected. It's just vibes say it'll be close. Paper says this favors the Vikings. How do you feel?
I have a very similar score. I had it 23-20
I
Minnesota.
like it.
I 23-20. It makes I mean, I think that we're going to be stuck kicking more field goals than we would like. I mean, y'all, this is the other part with it. If we look at Minnesota's last 3 games, so they had a 2-game losing streak after the bye, lost to Detroit, lost to the Rams. They beat the Colts 21-13. And the Colts, that was when they had Joe Flacco not playing well. They beat Jacksonville at Jacksonville with Mac Jones at quarterback 12-7. La-
Tight game.
yeah. And that, again, with Mac Jones. Last week, they beat Tennessee 23-13. They're not playing well against bad teams right now.
Here's my question, Nick. It's honestly the question that has tumbled around in my mind more than it needs to. So just buckle up. This is how I'm comfortable ending the show pretty much on this. This is sort of my final thought, but it's a
All right.
question. Okay? When does Caleb throw for his 12th touchdown? We are breaking Charlie O'Rourke's record, right? Because at this point we've gone weeks. I think it's over 100 touchdown or over 100 pass attempts with neither a pick nor a touchdown. It's a funny stat, isn't it? You talked about this earlier. There are tons of quarterbacks that get credit for throwing 100 pass attempts without an interception. So there's something positive there, but we haven't thrown any touchdowns either, which immediately kind of makes you go, what? and so, and it's not been ball off the hands of Keenan Allen either. It's been no touchdowns. And
Yeah.
so, when does Caleb break it? Oh, is this a 3 touchdown game? Does he get 2 touchdowns in garbage time next week and then another in garbage time in San Francisco? Like, how does this play out to you?
It happens next week. He has at least 12 touchdowns at Detroit next week,
By the end of Thanksgiving?
the end of Thanksgiving.
So is that 1 this week or 2 this week?
I'll say 2 this week, 1 next week.
I think that's reasonable. I need it. Not like I'm worried. I want that record to fall,
I
right?
and 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 again, I don't know what our recording schedule is going to be like, y'all. I'm traveling. I'm going. My wife is from near Detroit area, so I'll be likely watching that game amongst a bunch of Lions fans. But honestly, like I don't hate Detroit right now. Like they kind of deserve to win one, but I would like it to be a respectable game. So
That is
I'm
the
hoping that he
hottest.
breaks the record then, so I have something to really cheer
Oh
for at a
shoot.
minimum.
I think Caleb is about to break the yardage record. Feel free to stat check me on this as I talk about the Lions, but I'm seeing that Caleb's got 2016 passing yards right now, and I believe Mitch's record was right about 2150, right? So, maybe I just cursed Caleb Williams and now he won't throw for 150 yards. Wouldn't be the first Bears quarterback in my life to do
Yeah,
that, but
it's 20, 21, 93.
okay. So, in this case, Caleb would need 200 yards against a Brian Flores defense.
L
Not
look,
impossible.
he needs 180.
Okay, 200. Come on, Nick.
What do
Like
you
I
what do you mean 180?
hey, I'm rounding up. But
He needs 350 to break it.
but so uh I I'll tell you what, Nick. I like the Lions enough. Look, I was raised on Ndamukong Suh, like forearm shivering Jay Cutler and then stomping on another bear. So I don't like the Lions. You can't make me like the Lions. Matt Stafford is from like my town, went to my high school. You're not gonna make me like the Lions. But what I will give them, I am eating the hottest served crow in my life. I have never been as wrong about a team as I was about this Lions team, who I absolutely thought had all of the marks of regression. And dude, they haven't missed a beat since losing the defensive player of the year. Like,
Well,
mate,
and they've lost, I mean, injured often, but the other DN, Marcus Davenport, and then they just lost Alex Anzalone too.
like they're they're a great ball club this
Mm,
year. They're the kind of team that other teams aspire to be. And
yep,
maybe they won't win it all. I mean, it's really easy to win the October championship, and it's really hard to win both the October and February
yep,
championships. It's hard
yep,
to do,
yep,
but they are playing inspirational football right now.
yeah. But no, I'm good, man, with the show.
Perfect. Bears fans, thank you guys so much for listening. We always appreciate it. Nick, what's the emoji?
Ooh, good one. I think we got to go with the Turk. No, it's not. It's not Thanksgiving yet, so we'll have another Sunday show. You want to do
Should.
it
We
then?
should.
So let's see this one. I, let's do Bear Down. You know what I mean? Let's get the more
Bear down.
positive Bear
Bear
stuff. We just
down.
had a better performance than we thought.
What's the question? How many touchdowns Caleb throws?
How about this? So we're 10 games in. We have 7 left. Caleb's at what, 2016. How many passing yards does Caleb end up with?
A good question.
Because I think
Let's hear
I
it.
think the average right now it's like 34, like 50 or something like that is what his average would be right
A
now.
little hilarious how good of a season that ranks against a lot of the Bears' like passing seasons over history.
He
I mean,
he has 325 pass attempts.
it is a lot of pass attempts.
He's chucking it.
But we thought he would. Anyways, Bears fans, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate your support. Hang in there. Have a fun season. We'll be here with you. Bear down. Thanks so much for bearing with us.